everyone. Welcome to the Daily Grind. My name is Kelly Johnson, your fun and friendly host. We are on episode 5 of season 2, the very best one yet. Support from this podcast comes from Fluent. Fluent fits into your daily grind. No more finding time to study. You browse the web, you learn a new language. It's that simple. Learn more at usefluent.co. If you're a new daily grinder, listen to our pod, or have been grinding with us since season 1, feel free to check out our journey so far and share your feedback with us. Get us on the map, help us grow, share this episode with a friend, and tag them on social. And give us a rating and quick review on Apple. Virtual high five to you in advance. Since the season started, I just provide a fun fact to kick off our show. So fast with hashtag KellyFast here. So just before we go live with our special guests, here's our fact about college sports. So about 490,000 student athletes participate in athletic games each year. So that's a ton of college athletes playing sports. You name it, from tennis to basketball, football, lacrosse, soccer, whatever in between. In 2018, of those 490 students that participate in sports, about 1 of every 50 actually go on to compete professionally. So there's your fast fact of the day. So speaking of sports, let me introduce you to Hannah Lichtenstein. So Hannah is a former college athlete turned sports journalist and host of the Run Along podcast, talking about sports and stories with Olympians, high school ballers, super fan parents, and athletes who dealt with injury, congenital defects, and everything in between. So she currently is pursuing grad school at Northwestern University. So welcome, Hannah.
Thanks so much for having me on. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you on the pod and share your story with our Daily Grind listeners out there. So I guess maybe first and foremost right away, can you tell our listeners, if they haven't came across you already, who you are, where you're from, and what you do?
So born and raised in Los Angeles, pretty much in sports for as long as I can remember. The blessing and the curse of being an only child. My parents kind of read all the books, threw me into everything, ballet, piano, and it was soccer that stuck. Really just became obsessed with it. I know I try to refrain from using that word, but became obsessed with it. It was my passion. And yeah, it took me to, the most formative experiences of my life. It brought me community. It brought me, I ended up, playing soccer in college. So it brought me to the educational experiences that I was so grateful to have. And yeah, I think for anybody that starts doing anything when they're 4 or 5 years old, it became an incredibly important part of my identity, sometimes in problematic ways, and brought me, the connections that I'll cherish forever. And then, actually, after my D3 college soccer experience, I decided, hey, my body's only going to last in, this way for so long. Might as well use it while I have it. So I decided to embark on an overseas playing adventure and played abroad in Sweden for about a year. I was in the post-grad black hole of sending cover letters and resumes out, and no one was responding to me. And so I was like, it's time to go have an adventure. My time in Sweden was amazing for so many, athletic and personal reasons. And it was also in that downtime, I was an athlete, but I was no longer a student athlete. I had some free time to kind of really sit with, okay, what do I want to do? What am I interested in? What's next? And I've always loved history, storytelling, research, writing. I was a history major in undergrad, always loved sports, of course. And it really kind of those two things came together, started freelancing for some websites, and then ultimately started my podcast, which is really about the transition to life after being a competitive athlete, which came from a very personal place, of course, as I was experiencing transition and kind of leaving behind something I loved and sacrificed for, and trying to figure out what was next. My podcast, it's been great. It's brought me, so many things, which I'm sure, you can also attest to. And here we are now pursuing a sports media sort of career path. I just knew that sports needed to stay in my life in some capacity. And I think that this is the way it's going to stick. So combining it with my interests in writing and just, connecting humans, telling stories.
Really great. Really well said there, Hannah. Super motivational and inspirational in regards to that sports realm. We talk a lot of sports on the Daily Grind. We both love sports, as you can tell on our podcast. So we'll talk more throughout this interview. Speaking of sports, you started at a younger age. Did you play a variety of sports, both like individual and team sports? And then what led you to from playing at a younger age to playing in college, and then also playing in Sweden, and then finally, I guess, retiring if you.
Yeah, I mean, my parents put me in tennis. I did love basketball too. It's kind of a weird situation in California. So our soccer season for high school and middle school is actually in the winter because we don't really have seasons out here. So basketball is also in the winter. So I think if it not had been for that overlap, I maybe would have also pursued basketball. But no, I was pretty tunnel vision on soccer, which again, I think there was a dark underbelly to that fact of being, so all consumed by one sport. Maybe from a physical standpoint, thinking about what the body can handle, and then also definitely from a mental one. I was on did club teams, my parents my poor parents carpooling me to, the 3 different practices that I would be going to throughout the week. Their weekends were soccer tournaments essentially. And it was kind of how we shaped our lives. Again, it was beyond just playing. I mean, I was like that little girl that, if my dad was in a bar, he would sneak me under the table to watch sports because maybe I wasn't allowed to be there if I was underage, sort of thing. And I guess, in high school was when I really started to see, I've actually always kind of had the perfectionist athlete mentality, a lot of meltdowns, a lot of, when you're a forward, you're kind of tasked with either scoring the goals or creating the goals. And so I definitely took, I put a lot of weight on my shoulders in knowing that was my job. And, middle school, high school, I was definitely super hard on myself, but really driven. And at the same time, I always balanced academics with it all. I was never I wanted to play soccer in college. Clearly, it was something that wasn't gonna just burn out in me. But I was never gonna sacrifice my education for that. And I also kind of craved a smaller community where I could, pretty much know most of the faces that I saw on campus and have smaller classes. And that really led me to looking to a lot of small liberal arts colleges on the East Coast. And I ended up choosing one right outside of Philadelphia. Again, great experience. I tout D3 to, anybody I speak to. I know it can get a bad rap, and I know there's this whole D1 or bust mentality, but maybe for a different podcast. I love D3. It's incredible. Really was just a life-changing 4.5 years. I actually redshirted, so I stayed an extra semester. Sorry, I actually redshirted, so I stayed an extra semester. All the highs and lows, an ACL injury, winning championships, qualifying for our first NCAA tournament. It was really a pretty magical little bit that I happened to be at that school. Learned a lot about myself during that time, as most people do in college. But I think there was something special about being on that small campus, and of course in a team setting. And I always kind of say that my love for the sport and my desire to, what I wanted to give to it was a little bit disproportionate for what D3 asked. And so I always kind of felt a little bit, I don't want to use the word crazy, but just different in that sense where, again, I would never let let soccer get in the way of school, but it was something I really, really cared about. And I think that's what ultimately led me to wanting to keep it going. And I think just kind of having that wanting to prove, just because you're D3 doesn't mean you can't keep playing in some fashion after college. And it really was a kind of there was no method to the madness of how I ended up playing overseas. I really sent out about 90 emails to teams from 7 different countries. It was, oh my God. I really sent about 90 emails to 7 different countries, kind of pleading my case, and landed in Sweden through random connections. And there it was. Yeah.
Wow,
That's my long-winded answer that you probably didn't need all the details of, but tried to
Oh, that's super interesting. Yeah, being a D3 athlete, I think that's super, give you so much kudos in regards to, balancing both academics as well as, being part of the team. And you mentioned, like, as a forward, like, having a lot of weight on your shoulders. It definitely takes a lot of hard work and effort and sweat and whatever you want to add into that whole formula to make things happen. But yeah, we've actually had in the past, we've had a D3 football athlete on our show before. So it's cool to hear your perspective in the sport of soccer. 90 emails in 7 different countries. That's a ton of.
I know. I guess I was desperate, but sometimes you got to have a little desperation to make your dreams happen. So
Yeah,
there it goes.
for sure. Did you travel abroad before you went abroad, or like?
No, I never. One thing that's great about D3 is they do encourage that. That's really a holistic student athlete like person that they're trying to develop, and so yeah, you're very much able to go abroad. But no, didn't take advantage of that opportunity. So that was definitely something that I'm glad that I was able to experience in some kind of non-traditional form on the back end after I graduated.
Yeah, you definitely create your own path, and it's really cool. And then you're able to share your story now on your podcast, and a lot of different people share your story with our Daily Grind listeners out there too. Do you have advice for our younger listeners out there making similar decisions, like in their own respective sport?
Yeah, I think something that comes up is this tough balance that there is to strike between, if you are driven, if you're if you're committed, you want to, again, give it all, and that is required. Sacrifices are required, and kind of, again, being all in. But it's hard to find the balance between being all in as an athlete to achieve athletic success, finding that balance with, building other parts of your identity and recognizing that you're not just an athlete. And I know that, again, the youth sports culture and the, increasingly like professionalization of athletes, younger and younger, it makes it so there's really no time, it feels like, to develop other parts of these young folks. But I really think it's so important. So any time you can really strive to just get some perspective, kind of take that step back. I'm not telling you to like go miss a practice or, to step away from a team necessarily, but really just doing that check-in and recognizing there's a way to honor your future self and prepare your future self, because, this experience will also come to an end. And how do you make sure that that ending is not running 100 miles per hour into a brick wall,
Did you another question I have too, with like you mentioned transition, do you have advice for our listeners, like in that transition period from going traveling, so graduating college and then traveling to Sweden, like that transition, or even that transition after you return from Sweden?
Yeah, it was kind of interesting. I mean, I kind of see my retirement as almost like a gradual, like, stepping down. I tell a lot of people, I went and played in Europe, and it's like, whoa, like, that's intense. And yeah, there were parts about it that was intense, but in a way, it was like a de-intensifying from my student athlete experience, which was, I carried that student athlete label wherever I went. I was structuring my whole like 4 years around it, and again, all my friends, and so it was more almost all consuming in a collegiate athlete setting. And then in Sweden, of course, yes, I was there for soccer, but I had, like I said, so much free time. And so it kind of was like I still had this one foot into soccer, but there was a lot more ability for me to, again, reflect, kind of see what other things I might want to dive into next. So, and I know that not everybody can have that experience of like a de-intensifying. Yeah, so I think the more you can kind of think about the future in your current endeavors and not necessarily not be mindful, not necessarily get distracted by that future, but a couple minutes, every week where you can kind of fit it into, okay, what's this looking like for me? Oh, I just got injured. Now I might have more free time. I want to be doing my rehab, but now that I'm injured, I might be able to be thinking about some other things, that sort of stuff, if it makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that was really a good answer in regards to preparing for that transition. I think that's really important. And again, at like a younger age too, like you have a whole lifetime to do a lot of and accomplish a lot of different things out there in the world. So yeah, speaking of other accomplishments or things non-sport, or I guess not on the soccer field but off the field with that transition. So how did you become interested in podcasting?
Podcasts for me, I can get pretty choked up when I talk about podcasts. I won't be crying on the interview, but they're really special to me. Like really, yeah, they've just gotten me through a lot. I think it's this really unique medium where if I was on the bus in Sweden traveling an hour to practice, I was listening to them. If I had trouble falling asleep, I mean, I guess something I really didn't touch on is like how traumatic the end of college sports experience was for me. It was bad. It was, and again, thinking about motivation for why I ended up starting my podcast, but there was definitely, it was a perfect storm. This was something that I had built so much around. I had one therapist describe it as the middle structure or the middle block in my Jenga structure of self. And so when soccer was going to be taken away, I really didn't kind of prepare in the ways that I've been advocating for that. But yeah, it was traumatic. I was a captain. I ended up getting injured, all sorts of things. And yeah, I was diagnosed with depression around that time. And in those moments of not being able to fall asleep, I would listen to podcasts in those moments. And it's so incredible what we have at our fingertips with podcasts, and just the fact that they're free. It's so cool. And I remember my dad in a particularly dark time, he told me, I think it was a play off of a Sherlock Holmes quote, but when the black dog comes, which is depression, when the black dog comes, study something or do something nice for someone. And I think, podcasts are kind of like millennial, 21st century, so easy way of studying something. And you can do it you can listen when you're cooking, when you're doing laundry, all of the things. So can't say enough good things about podcasts. Was definitely into, This American Life, Radio Lab. I just was like a sponge, soaking it all in. I love all sorts of podcasts, finance, storytelling. Yeah. So for me to start my own podcast was like a natural thing, almost. Again, with the passions that I kind of had around sports and around, already loving writing and research myself, and the medium of podcasting myself, kind of just jump right into it. I know it's a very popular, lots of people are getting into podcasting. It's really amazing how like democratized it is. And really, if you have an iPhone or anything with a microphone, you can get started.
For sure. Yeah. Podcasting, again, really great answer. It seriously has taken off over the years. And you mentioned too, it's a free resource to use. You can kind of, I got into podcasting because like I was sick of listening to my music a lot. So I was like, I'm going to mix it up. And, podcasting, I've heard great things. You can learn different subjects or languages, or, hear about.
Or about people that got murdered,
Yeah. Yeah. Have good laughs. Like the list goes on and on. So yeah, I guess what was your aha moment in starting your podcast, the Run Along podcast?
Yeah, well, I joked or there was some meme I saw that was like, it's 2019, you can either go to therapy or start a podcast. So that definitely related to my story. And I guess that was the aha moment. It was like, okay, I feel so isolated in this thing, like I was it was grief. What I was feeling was grief, but I think I had such a specific idea of what you're allowed to grieve about. And it was weird to kind of conceptualize the loss of a sport as like a death. But the more I, thought about it, when you've been doing something since you're 4 or 5 years old, since you can walk, like other people have got to be, having gone through the same things. And I really wanted to include a range. It didn't have to be all like depressing, sad. I left sport behind. Some people that I've spoken to could not have been more excited to leave sport. They were burnt out and they stayed in sport for different reasons. And again, there's lots of different ways that people end their careers. So for me, it really came from that personal place of this isn't being talked about enough, or I feel like the ways that I've heard it being talked about are not it could be deeper, it could be more thoughtful, it could be more inclusive. So I guess that was the aha moment for me. And I'm definitely someone where once I get an idea, I'm 0 to 100 on it, which has, again, its pros and cons, but it really kind of just motivated. I was so excited. I like couldn't sleep. I was like thinking about the website. I was thinking about all things. And that feeling I had in getting ready to start the podcast, it ignited something in me that felt like was squashed maybe, for a while, forever, when I had said bye to my sport. So it was exciting.
Yeah, I like it, coming to a close on soccer and now blooming into this Run Along podcast. Yeah, you launched it last May, if I'm correct on that. So it's been around just over a year. So happy 1 year on the podcast. So yeah, for our Daily Grind listeners that haven't tuned in already, I've tuned in, but can you tell our listeners out there about the Run Along podcast? Like, what do you talk about and things of that nature?
Yeah. So I guess kind of like the flow of each episode is I do really kind of start from the beginning with the guest, because I feel like it's important to get that buildup and that sense of what role sport played in their life. How was it treated by their family? How intense was it for them? What kind of coaches did they have? What were some pivotal moments in their athletic career? And really, we kind of like build in that way, kind of walking through their life. And then, yes, we get to the end. What was that end like? Do you remember your last game? Do you remember your last meet? What were the feelings like? Were you ready to leave it behind? Was there, feelings of nostalgia, anxiety? Did you talk about it with anybody? What was hard? Did you miss, there's a lot of things we don't even think about, from you're not seeing your friends every day, maybe in the same capacity. You're not getting that sort of mentorship check-ins from coaches who, there's like this weird thing with coaches where it's not like they don't care about you anymore, but they got to start thinking about the next team. There's a bunch of fitness and nutrition transitions that come with it. So yeah, we just kind of talk about the highs and the lows. Some people, you have a lot of free time, again, that you didn't have on your hands before. So maybe there's a positive there. And then depending on how old they are, sometimes I'm talking to people that just finished their career a few months ago. Sometimes they're older. We talk about that journey of finding their what's next, their next chapter, their next thing that, kind of like with me, what that excites them in the same way and that fulfills them, and what do they think sport like helped them with in that next part of their life, those sort of like transferable skills. And yeah, it's really, again, kind of been so inclusive, trying to more recently, like talking about the Black athlete identity in the wake of a lot of Black Lives Matter content on the internet. And yeah, Pride Month, we really try to just like think about the athlete experience and athlete identity in all sorts of ways. I mean, we did like a whole concussion episode because there was like a concussion awareness month sort of thing last year. So yeah, short answer is just it's been arranged, and but yeah, just to give you a sense of what the show is like.
Yeah, that's what I really enjoyed about the Run Along podcast. Speaking for myself, because I've tuned into a few episodes already, I like the wide variety of guests that you have on the show. So you're not just in one specific sports, but you're all over the place. And then also too on the age levels and where they're at, if they're in college, if they played the Olympics, things of that nature. So I think it's really cool that you have a lot of different personalities on the show. and you can hear more about them and have your listeners, learn from their own true stories. So yeah, speaking of your interviews, do you have any favorite ones that you had so far, or like behind the scenes, like bloopers or anything funny that has happened that hasn't been published on the episode, but you have it in your
Yeah, well, here's a sad blooper, and like a moment of failure that, again, on our social media or on our channels, we're not necessarily talking about those setback moments. But so I don't know if you know who Christine Lilly is. She's a very famous, like 99er, one of the U.S. women's national team players that won the 1999 World Cup. I mean, again, as a lifelong soccer player, she's a hero for sure. Was able to get an interview with her, like so excited from a journalist standpoint, from like a lifelong soccer player standpoint, and it did not record. So it was heartbreaking. I went back to go listen to it. Was freaking out. So that's a sad blooper. Yeah, I think,
I remember like one of your earlier episodes. This one hit home for me too, because based out of Chicago, when you interviewed.
Oh no, was it when I mispronounced Duluth? Yeah, okay, that was my very first episode. Right when you started talking, I knew you were gonna bring up that episode. Yeah, that's fine. That did happen.
Regardless of the pronunciation, I did an okay job on Hannah's last name today, but I butchered people's names in the past. But the Cinderella After Midnight, it was one of Hannah's first episodes, but she actually interviewed
Carson Shanks. He was a member of that, Loyola Chicago team that captivated everybody.
Yeah, the one that went to the Final Four, was killing it at March Madness a few years back, which is cool. So that's just one example of the many guests that Hannah has on her show. So yeah, Run Along podcast. Be sure to check that one out. So going forward with interviewing a wide variety of athletes on your podcast, do you see similarities in from the high school to professional to post college or wherever? Do you for example, in the mindset of their goals?
I think a similarity, to get kind of profound here, I mean, again, a lot of this show revolves around endings and transitions, and something that's really come up is it doesn't matter a whole lot how your career ends in terms of, finding your peace. That peace really needs to come from within, because I know for me as an athlete, I had a sense of like the perfect ending to a career. But even when you win that gold medal, there are those athletes that are like, well, can I can I keep going? Can I shoot for the next one? I mean, and then of course our sense of we don't want to lose that state championship as our last game. But yeah, that stuff matters for a little bit, but closure really comes from, your own sort of processing and reflecting and finding meaning. And that's something that I've really kind of noticed in all my guests, even though, like you mentioned, it has been such a wide range. I mean, another thing that's come up is the importance of coaches. That coach that said something that traumatized them, that really set them off in a certain way in their career, or that coach that was really a mentor and inspired them and, maybe really kind of gassed them up to that next level. And for all of the guests that I've spoken to, when they reflect on things that they miss, I mean, of course, the fire that comes with competing and that sort of glory, I guess, but always the things that people talk about, what they miss is the camaraderie and the friendships developed through sport. And I think for me, in thinking about not necessarily how to replicate or like maybe what it is that I want in my next community, my next chapter, that is something I should be looking for. Because, oh yeah, hey, I'm thinking that was such an important part of it for me. Like, yes, it was the scoring goals, but I think I gave as much weight as I should have to the other parts of sport. And that really comes up for so many guests.
Yeah, really well said there. Lots of great key takeaways on just, the mindset and goals that a lot of athletes across sports have that are very similar. Yeah. Do you still stay in touch with anyone from your college team or even from the Sweden team too?
Yeah. Yeah. You'll always have a special bond when you go through things with hard things and good things with people. And I feel like, yeah, the team is very much an example of that. The trials of, doing suicides and getting yelled at by your coach and not wanting to get up for 6 a.m. practices. And then again, yeah, lifting a trophy. So I'll always cherish my college teammates and do keep in touch with some of them. I think something that needs to be said and that I also struggled with is, those younger friends that are still on the team. It can be weird when you're going through this transition, when you do need a bit of that separation, but you have close friends on that team. How do you set boundaries for yourself? And I wish I had a formula or an answer, but yeah, I think it becomes easier to connect again and get on a level with friends again once they're also out of the team. Yeah, and of course with Sweden, it's been so great. I think, having just different experiences, people from different walks of life, and so I do try to keep in touch with them despite the 9-hour time difference and the weird way that Swedes are. They're very shy, very funny though. Yes, definitely.
That's great to hear. Yeah, the time zone differences. It's always fun to have someone you're talking to abroad on the podcast. Just like, oh, it's their evening, your morning, or vice
Exactly.
versa.
Yeah.
But that's so great. I think you mentioned it too. Just having that really positive team dynamics and be able to share that and kind of grow that as the time goes on when you're involved in sports or whatever activity that you're participating in. I think that's really important. Again, it makes you enjoy what you do and something that you're passionate about, and then you can always be involved in sports, still be a sports enthusiast.
Yeah.
You still are physically active, and you can participate in leagues or tournaments, or just go out to have fun, listen to podcasts about sports. So the list can go on and on in regards to just fulfilling that need, or just again going back to the meme that helped you start your whole podcast. Like, you see something that's a reminder to help motivate you to create a goal that you want to
As
get.
long as your love for sport doesn't manifest in you trying to live through your child who played sports, then it's all good.
Yeah. Yeah, totally agree. A few people out there, but I won't name shame anyone. But yeah, totally agree. Yeah, just be yourself, do stuff that you want, that you enjoy, and yeah, go sports. So, Hannah, did you see yourself 5 years ago doing like what you do today, like starting this podcast and everything like that?
No, I think the recognition, the eureka moment of these two silos that were so important, sports and writing and, journalism, that didn't come together for me until kind of late. So 5 years ago, Hannah was thinking maybe like a history PhD. I know. So kind of like the extreme of one of those interests. And then again, there was that kind of nagging like thing about me that knew that sports needed to stay. And so of course there's a lot of different avenues for that. I definitely entertain the possibility of coaching. So that was something that I was looking at, and I still think there are tons of things about that profession that I would love. Hannah of 5 years ago also probably opened an LSAT book to maybe be a lawyer and then quickly close that LSAT book. So the answer in short is no.
Yeah, but for a good thing though, right? I would say you don't regret anything, like, I guess, from the past, or things that you've done so far that have accomplished with your podcast, in sports, and in journalism.
Definitely. And all the experiences I had, maybe little internships or stints coaching or whatever, like it gave me more information. And that's all that you can really ask for when you're young. And just as long as you're still moving, you're still figuring things out, and you might not hit that passion but right away, but you'll figure out things that you don't want to do.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, I totally agree. I think you mentioned it earlier too in our interview, just like from that transitioning and being able to identify what you enjoy and what you think you might want to do down the road and things of that nature. It helps you focus on the path that you want to take in the future. I think that's really important. We're really goal driven on this podcast, so I think your motivational words out there are really helping our listeners, define who they are and what they want to get out of life and what they want to do down the road. So yeah, Hannah, we talked about your daily schedule. What's on your daily grind in the upcoming months later this year?
Yeah, I mean, this last year for me has been kind of a weird one. I mean, came back from Sweden in October, and then my plan was actually to do another go around abroad and then, okay, officially call it and pivot to a more real world adult life. But then the pandemic hit, and it was during those quarantine lockdown times. Again, I was had a greater sense of what I maybe wanted to do, or at least what I like to do. And my starting to get some back injuries. My body's hurting a little bit more, and so that's when grad school kind of came into my periphery. And the daily grind in the next coming weeks will be driving to Chicago with my dad. We'll see how this father-daughter road trip goes. It certainly will be an adventure. And then, classes start mid-September, and we will certainly be a memorable cohort being in the pandemic. So what will that look like covering sports in a pandemic? Will we have to report on replays of games? I don't know. There's still a lot to be figured out. Very obsessed with Peloton right now. I downloaded the Peloton app. I'm on my free Peloton month. I highly recommend it for all folks out there. It's definitely again, I think a lot of athletes, as they try to figure out what workout kind of fills that need. Maybe it's, rec league sports, which aren't super feasible right now with the pandemic, or at least I don't consider them morally feasible for me. But Peloton's been great. It really gives the sense of, working out with others and pushing yourself. And so Peloton's in the schedule every day. Just I'm at my parents' house trying to enjoy my time with them and the dogs. And we'll be moving to a new city and all that comes with that. Again, in a pandemic, so kind of weird, but certainly looking forward to experiencing all that Chicago has to offer, living with a new roommate and being a part of a community again. I mean, in the way that I was in Sweden, I had a team, and I really haven't been tethered to anything like that for 9, 10, 11 months. My work has mostly consisted of babysitting, freelancing, stuff like that. So to be connected to a group of similar aged peers or like-minded peers and doing things, I'm looking forward to that.
Really exciting stuff down the road for you, Hannah. Good luck with the road trip. I think by the time this episode airs, you should be safely to Chicago. So
yes,
we're excited for you out there. Lots of stuff on the radar. Yeah, keep up the grind. So also too, Hannah, do you have a word of the day to motivate our listeners out there, or a phrase or a quote too?
Honestly, I'm gonna pass it to someone else with this phrase. So I'm just gonna say Brene Brown. Brene Brown. Okay, that's who everyone needs. That's my phrase, 2 words. I know it's a proper noun, so maybe it's not exactly what you were looking for, but she's so wise and I love her stuff. So I highly recommend it to everybody else.
Yes, we like it. Very fitting with today's episode. Also, last but not least, if our listeners want to have questions, comments, they want to follow you, they want to, tune into the Run Along podcast, how can they do so after this episode?
Yeah, so definitely on all the major podcast platforms. So Apple, Spotify, iHeartRadio, whatever your preferred means is. On Twitter and Instagram at Run Along Podcast. And then there's a little share my story button at runalongpodcast.com if anybody listening wants to talk about their transition to life after being an athlete.
Awesome. Yes, we will put all Hannah's contact info in today's show notes as always. So where to find the Run Along podcast, as well as possibly sharing your story on there. So that's super, super awesome. Thank you for tuning in today's episode. A big thank you to Hannah for being on the podcast. Hey Daily Grinders, we have an Instagram contest with Fluent for the month of September. Head over to @KJF Daily Grind to enter and win a Fluent prize pack and Visa gift card. Ways to find the Daily Grind: follow us on Instagram at KJF Daily Grind and on Facebook as well. Check our website at www.kjfwi.org. Feel free to follow your host, Kelly Fast, here on Instagram at KellyJLefty or on Twitter at KellyJLefty as well. Until next time, my name is Kelly Johnson. Have a great day.
Thank you.